Hi, thanks for tuning in. My name's Pete and Cedar's away this week, so he's kindly asked me to step in and help. And today I thought we'd check on a split that I made 10 days ago here in order to mitigate the swarming tendency of this hive. When a hive gets really overcrowded in the springtime, it's spring here in Australia, then the bees have a tendency to swarm and take half their colony with the queen and go out to find a new home. They'll actually make new queens in the old box, and those queens will get going with the resources left there. The swarm will actually fly out and find a new home and start from scratch again, and that's the way that bees reproduce their colony. Now, in order to mitigate this and keep our bees in our apiary, we really want to try and split this hive and sort of fool it into thinking it's already swarmed. And this is just good practice as a beekeeper, because swarms can really land anywhere and end up in your neighbour's roof cavity or their letterbox, so we really want to avoid that. So I thought we'd just check on this because it's last week Cedar split a hive and he mentioned walk-away splits, which is a way of splitting a hive where you don't really know where the queen is, whether she's in the new box or the old box, and it's a way of splitting without having to find her. Now, we want to check on this walk-away split and make sure there's either the old queen in there or some queen cells, so that the bees have started to make new queens and we know they're well on their way to being a successful colony. So just get my smoker and put a little bit of smoke in the entrance just to let them know that we're going to open them up, and just wait a little bit for them to settle down in there, and put my hood on. And if you're new to beekeeping, you probably want to put your gloves on. So take the roof off. And I've just got this magnet in my pocket here, which is a really great little idea. Just put a magnet in the pocket of your sleeve. It's just a bar magnet, and your hive tool will actually stick to it, and it's really handy when you're messing around inside a beehive and you want to get rid of your hive tool or get easy access to it. So I've got it here. I'll just crack the inner cover lid. It's already cracked. It's still loose. And just look to see the bees on the bottom. I'll just put that against the entrance so any bees can crawl back in. And you can see it was a four frame split into the new box. And these blank frames are there to take up the space. Now, when we've split, we've kept the brood nest together in the centre, and we've put the blank frames on the edges to let the bees store their honey and pollen around the edges of the hive, and they'll do this to make thermal mass and insulation for them. But if you do put two blank frames together in a hive, you really want to make sure that you keep checking on that hive, because the bees, when they have too much space and they don't have drawn combs either side of this blank frame, they do have a tendency to cross their comb, and that can be quite annoying and messy to clean up. You really want them to draw nice straight combs. So if you do this way, you want to check back every few weeks, make sure they're drawing straight. So just get my hive tool and insert the J end underneath and carefully pull the comb out. Now you can see there's not many bees in here. And this can be a really critical stage for the bees to get through. So they are queenless, they don't have a way of reproducing. I'm just going to touch these bees really lightly to get them out of the way, because I can see some queen cells, which is what we are looking for. And sometimes you can blow on the bees to get them to move, just blow gently, and they'll move out of the way. I can see these queen cells are new, they're not capped yet, which means what's inside them is a larvae. Now, the way bees make their queens is they take a normal fertilized worker egg, and that egg is hatched into a larvae, and they'll actually just start tearing down the cell walls around that larvae, and they'll build these large cells to house the large bodies of the queen that's going to grow inside it. And then they'll feed that larva royal jelly for the whole duration of time that it's a grub. Workers are fed royal jelly, worker larvae is fed royal jelly for 3 days, and then they're switched to a substance called bee bread, which is fermented pollen. But the queens are fed royal jelly for the whole time, and then that's what transforms them into queens. Royal jelly is a very, very hormone-rich substance. So I split this hive 10 days ago, and I gave it eggs so that the bees could make these queens. Now, queen cells are capped around about day 7 or 8. So if we take day 1 is the time that the old queen laid the egg, and then the larva's hatched out, and these cells are almost capped. I'll just blow on the bees gently so I can see what's in these cells. So I can see some nice large grubs in there, some nice large larvae. You do really want to be careful when you're manipulating frames with queen cells on them, because the larvae have a breathing tube on either side of their head, and they actually lie in a pool of royal jelly. And if you flip the frame quickly or you shake the frame, that can actually flip the larvae, and the side that's closed, which is lying in the pool of royal jelly, gets flipped up, and the side that's open lands in the pool, and they actually drown. So you just do have to be very careful. So that's fantastic. So I've seen three queen cells, and so I know that this colony has a great chance of surviving and making it through this pretty vulnerable stage. Just carefully lift this out. So I'm turning this frame on its side. I really want to keep it in plane with gravity. If I'm trying to tilt it and you have naturally drawn comb, you might find that the comb will actually bend and break. So you do want to keep the comb in plane. So I can flip it upside down, and I'll just blow to move the bees out of the way. And what I'm looking for is any more queen cells, basically. And I can't see any on this side. So I can see all this capped brood here are worker bees pupating from grubs into adults underneath these cappings. And this is eggs from the old hive that have then gone on to pupate. So we don't have any fresh eggs in here because the colony is queenless. So any questions, please put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering them. And if you're just tuning in, My name's Pete. Seed is away this week, and he's just asked me to jump in and help out. And I'm checking a split that I made 10 days ago just to see if there's queen cells. And it's great because there's a queen cell right there, and that lets us know that this hive has every chance of getting going and succeeding and becoming a big strong colony like its parent just next door that it was split from.
Andrea asked, "Hi, I inspected my hive after over a month and found total devastation. Wasps and no bees. Some large larvae, but no bees. What do I do to clean out the hive?"
Good question. What you can do is, if your brood frames are naturally drawn comb like this, and they don't have any wires, you can just get a knife and cut the comb out. Just cut everything out. Get your hive tool here and scrape off all the messy comb and all the mess. And you can actually ball all this wax up into a bundle and just wrap it in some newspaper or some paper towel, and throw it in the fire if you've got a fireplace. It's really great fire fuel. Otherwise you can just put it into your bin, but it's not great really to do that. If you've got frames that have started with foundation and you've got wires going through, what you'll need to do is just cut along the wires in little strips like that. Just run your knife through the comb along the wires and then just push out that old yucky comb and start again that way. In terms of your box, you might want to scrape out any old comb that's kind of stuck on the side, and you might want to get into if you've got the tray in the flow hive too, you'll get into that and scrape it out into the bin. If you've got the classic, then you may want to get your core fluke slider and just scrape that off into the bin. Any more questions?
Betty says, "So will they kill all but one queen?"
Yes, they will. What happens when the first queen hatches out is that she'll actually go around and seek out all the other queen cells, and she'll actually sting those queens through their cells, and then the bees will open up those cells and drag those queen larvae out, or queen pupa I should say, out. If two queens hatch at the same time, they'll actually make a little sound called piping, and I believe that's to let the other queens know where they are, and I've read that they'll actually fight to the death, but I've never seen this happen.
Graham has a question. What would you do if you see a hive that has no eggs or a queen? Is the only option to bring a new queen from outside?
That's one option, and it is a good option, but if you have another hive, then you can save your queenless colony by getting a frame with eggs on it and taking it and putting it in your queenless colony, and the bees will then hopefully make a new queen from those eggs and young larvae. But if you've only got one colony, then yes, you will have to buy a queen, and you want to do that as soon as possible to save your colony. So any questions, please write them in the comments and we'll get to answering them. And I'm just going to look at this last frame here. And it's a bit windy today, so normally we wouldn't open this hive, but I really do need to check and make sure that this hive has got a chance at surviving. So I'm just going to look for more queen cells. There's a hidden one actually, just on this side here. Just down there, it's attached to the end bar of the frame.
Doug has a question. He says, how do you protect from mites?
From?
Mites.
Mites?
So varroa mite?
Varroa mite?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. we don't actually have varroa mite here in Australia, although it's probably just a matter of time before it comes in. So I've got to say I don't really know the answer to that, but if our great team at Flow will get to that question.
What's the smallest land size I could maintain a hive on? I'm in suburbia with 500 square meters, says Glenn.
Yeah, that's a great question. I often get asked that question, and your property is fine to have more than one beehive on, depending on your local council's regulations with bees. You may want to check that out, and you want to locate your hive that, somewhere where it's not going to fly straight into your neighbours. I myself live on a 700 square metre block, and I usually have anywhere between 2 and 12 hives on there. If your neighbours do complain, then that can be a problem, but you do want to just bribe them with honey. That can be really great to just keep them sweet. But yeah, definitely don't let that stop you. And often beekeeping in an urban area can be really great because people have got gardens that are flowering all year round, so your bees have always got forage to go to. The other thing to watch out for is to give them easy access to water, because you really don't want them in your neighbour's pool. Any more questions? All right.
Sin says, is putting another super on an alternative to undertaking a hive split?
Yes, that is definitely an alternative. Was that an under super? So if you've got a super on your hive already and you want to manage the space, you can give the bees more space to fill, and that'll give all the bees something to do, and it'll make the hive far less crowded, and it can go a certain way to prevent swarms. However, it probably will boost bee numbers, and you may find your bees will swarm later down the track anyway, but definitely it can be a good way to go. Another alternative is to put on another brood box, and you probably, if you've got naturally drawn comb, you probably want to do this underneath your existing brood box, because the bees will want to draw from the top down. So you may have to lift your existing brood box off, put your other one on your baseboard, and then put your existing one on top of that, your queen excluder and your super.
Danny asks, what do you suggest with beginning a hive when you have a toddler?
I've got young kids myself, and I try to get them involved in the bees from an early age. Flow have really cute little kids' bee suits available, and if you get them in those and you get them to see the amazing life of bees inside the hive, usually they'll just get hooked. I've found with stings, kids are really, they're very adaptable, so once a kid gets stung and learns that it's not so bad, then they usually get over it and they get straight back into it.
We have another question from Vicky, who says, I have plenty of water sources, but my bees prefer my neighbour's spa water. How can I stop them drinking away from home?
That's a great question, and I don't really have the answer to that, because the problem is with that is that bees often prefer water from pools, as things like salt water pools and chlorine pools have minerals in them that they seem to like, and they also prefer dirty water over clean water. So once a beehive is oriented to a specific water source, it's very hard to get them to change over. One way that I know to do it is to actually take your colony away. So you'll wait till night time when all the foragers are at home, you'll block the entrance off, take them away, 6 kilometers or so, leave them for a week to reorient themselves, and then come back and do the in reverse and then open them up at your old location to try and get them to reorient to your water source. It can help to have a dirty water source there, because for some reason bees like the dirty water source. Some people theorise that it's because they can smell it better.
Diane says, nectar is seeping out of the bottom of the flow super. Is there anything I can do?
Yes, so I might just put the lid on this split, just because it's getting a little gusty here. Now sometimes these plugs can get a little blocked, and you can see the build up of honey there, and if we pull the plug it just runs out. So what you can do is you get your flow key. In this case I don't have a flow key with me, I just get my Hive tool, and if I can get it in there, can't quite get it in there, try the other end, and just pry that little hole open because it gets blocked up with wax. The bees like to block it up. So now we'll plug that hole back up, and now the bees will actually stick their tongues up through that hole and clean up all that honey. Oh. So I just twisted that too hard actually. So that can be an issue that you just have to keep on top of, just to make sure that that hole stays clear, and that's the leak back point where the bees will clean up any excess. Any more questions?
Amina asks, is it a good idea to feed the bees pollen patties in the fall season, like an extra treat before entering in cold season?
That can really depend on your location. If you're in a cold climate, which I'm guessing you probably are if you're considering feeding pollen, it can definitely be a good idea to do that. Around here we have quite a lot of flowering seasons most of the year, so it's not that necessary around here, but a good idea is to talk to your local beekeepers and see what they do season to season, and they'll know the best way to beekeep in your area and for your climate.
No more questions.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and it's been a pleasure. I'll tune back in, and Cedar will be here next week.